Hi there, I'm Don Taylor, the chairman of the Learning Technologies Conference, and we're here today at the conference to investigate how the LMS is progressing, what exciting new things are happening with learning management systems. And with me we've got Matt Wicks from Dreamtek and Liam Butler from Netdimensions exploring this issue. So guys, learning management systems, they've been around for a long time. Is it possible that there's anything new and exciting happening? And if so, what is it? So Matt, what's new, what's happening?
I think the big thing that's happening in terms of learning management systems is the fact that they're being much more contextualized and much more integrated into into people's workplaces, much more integrated into the pathways that they're following through portals, through integration into apps. And so basically, rather than you going to the LMS is coming to you. Behind the scenes.
I'm going to pick up with you on that on a second with that, just in case there's some awful legacy software issues coming into play. But Liam, what's your view? What's exciting?
I think that the biggest change is people don't know they're even interacting with an LMS anymore by the use of Matt saying about portals and open up the API, so you can take a piece of functionality from an LMS and embed it in your Google homepage or have it run on an app on an iPad. Users before felt they were being pushed through some formal structured learning. Now it's just part of their everyday life.
So this is the point then. We talk about integrating it. Now, we say LMS and you say integrating, suddenly a lot of people are going to be thinking, right, that sounds like an awful lot of coding, a lot of work in the background, but they're not. Liam, you're saying APIs, and suddenly integrating with your Google homepage, and it's sounding very sexy, and I can do it on my iPhone.
Most people are familiar now with gadgets and widgets, and now they can drag around elements on their website, the BBC website. You can customize how you want, dragging the elements around on. So when you're looking at news, you can have your financial news first, and entertainment where you want it on the homepage. Same with your Google homepage. Right. Most LMSs now you can do that as well. It's a question of dragging the elements around and making a custom homepage that way, or a full-on blown website that looks like your own company. Yeah,
and is that the sort of thing you were talking about, or was there more?
No, exactly. So we've been working together with Netdimensions on a large portal infrastructure inside Jaguar Land Rover, and part of what that's doing is taking people's learning, serving them up elements of learning on either a large scale or a granular scale. And then being able to integrate that into their devices so that they can take it off and do a little bit of learning here, a little bit of learning there, but then taking it to the next stage and being able to integrate that into everything they're doing. So it might be that you get a news story that comes up, and that news story is inherently linked to related learning that you might want to follow up. It might be that your manager has said you're going to go on this event, fantastic, and here is the learning you've got to do before that thing comes along. But also, as Liam was saying, in terms of the social feed, so that social learning is becoming more and more important. And what does that actually mean? Well, it means, in one way, it means being able to track your interactions and being able to track your learning, which you're doing via other people through the LMS, which is sitting behind the scenes in all of this.
And what you're alluding to there is something I think a lot of people are talking about, which is this idea that you both expressed, that, well, we can have surely the LMS more or less in the background, invisible, and we come across what we need to learn as we need to learn it, almost in a predictive way. Now, how realistic is that? I mean, how much is that a pipe dream? How much is it really possible? And what does it actually look like? Liam, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a real-world context, maybe someone out fixing dialysis machines in a hospital, if there's a fault in the machine, they actually want to be able to look at what that fault is. Maybe there's a standard operating procedure, how they fix it. This is a real-world situation. Sure. So in that case, they can actually be doing that training off a tablet like an iPad within an app. Yeah. That actually is interacting with the LMS. They are, to them, they're just doing what they've always done. They've looked at the instruction manuals, how to fix something. But in that context, the company can see that engineers are often coming across a particular fault and having to train themselves up on that. They then know that when they have new engineers coming back through the operating base, they should maybe give them additional training on that. So it's given some contextual reality to what people are doing.
Everyone's talking about predictive stroke adaptive learning. How close is this to being adaptive?
It's close to adaptive learning. I mean, I mean, you can suggest new learning outcomes from someone's past behavior. And it's what people maybe are used to from shopping on Amazon. You know, you pass by behavior might suggest a similar sort of book. It's a bit more serious when you're doing it within the learning world. When you go on Amazon, you're buying a book and it suggests a similar related title, it might make a howling mistake, but it's no big deal. If you're doing it within learning and you're fixing a dialysis machine and it suggests an alternative learning so someone has to do, but it's actually inappropriate for fixing a dialysis machine, someone could die. So the context is slightly different. People always give that Amazon comparison, but the real world is a bit more serious. So we are doing it, but it's a bit more structured and more rules-based than it would be maybe within a merchandise situation like in Amazon. Even though, I mean, obviously Amazon's rules and algorithms are tremendously sophisticated, but they don't have to take into account the high risks that you're talking about here. Because it's the old 70-20-10 rule. What often the LMS is doing is at 10%. It tends to be, more often than not, it's the unsexy side of training, which often can do with compliance. Compliance often has insinuation that someone could either be fined, go to prison, or die when you get it wrong. So that's, in our world, we have to worry about with pilots or dialysis machines, or in the case of JLR, mechanics working in vehicles, the risk that it could destroy some sort of reputation, and that's just as important. We're talking about being adaptive and making sure we're adapting for our environment. This is a bit out there, but we're hearing a lot, of course, about the role of new technology here at the conference and how that's linking with every form of learning. I was at the bar last night with a chap from Israel talking about an absolutely fantastic way of using a combination of different technologies to produce stuff that goes straight from a user creating content to a phone to be learned and is linked into geographical information. So with that sort of worldview in mind, is there any scope, do you think, in the future for the LMS to be an integral part of people's learning lives, using data like location to produce location-specific and helpful learning for people?
Yes, I think there is. I mean, I think with all of these things, you're basically trying to make sure that the tools that you're using are not one size fits all. So I think there are cases where it's absolutely not appropriate, but I think having the flexibility. So, you know, I mean, a good example is if you're out in the field, you're trying to deal with an earthquake or something like that, you know, and you're able to get local information very quickly. You're able to get maybe it's a video, or maybe it's a series of documents that have been put together by people who have been there before, or maybe you're in the field and you're trying to deal with a compliance issue, and those elements have got to be available. And those are targeted quite specifically, and they targeted quite specifically to your language. They're targeted via the LMS. They're targeted specifically to your location, as you say, via the GPS on the device. You know, but they also, as things expand, they're also targeted to your context. So it might be that you're in a situation where you need some emergency information, and in that particular case, the learning is targeted to be a small snapshot, a quick piece of learning, whereas it might be that actually you're trying to deal with something much more in depth and trying to, you know, deal with local officials, going through complicated procedures where depth of knowledge is important. And again, that context is there. Now we're certainly not at the point yet where all of those things can be automatically disseminated. But I mean, in a way, I think it's almost like going back to the early days of Google, where, you know, Google has an amazing search algorithm to be able to find the information, or in this context, the learning you like, but it's been tweaked over years and got much, much better. And although they don't have compliance in the same way, it is adjusted to suit various purposes. It's market specific in the way that it's done. And also now, increasingly, you know, if I go onto my Android phone, I've got Google now, it'll give recommendations locally. You know, and I don't see that as being any different to the way in which people will access their learning. I mean, the way it's tracked will still be via the traditional back-end LMS, the dashboards, the analytics tools, and all of those sorts of things. The way it's served up will be through that. But the discovery method is much more broader and contextual. But as I say, you know, like Google has developed over the years, it's still in a huge development phase. Sure. I do like it when my Google on my Android phone throws up the fact that Arsenal have actually won a football match. I mean, that's a delightful piece of information. It's a rare occurrence.
Doesn't happen often enough, unfortunately. You're talking about discovering information, discovering bits of learning. Now, obviously, in the past, as you were saying, Liam, people will get to a course or whatever through a traditional driven formal format. You know, go to this page and here's your course. But both of you at the beginning mentioned portals. Do you want to just talk about that in a way? What does a portal mean? Is it just a fancy way of, as people would say, putting lipstick on a pig with an LMS, or is it something more than that?
I think it's a lot more. Most companies, I think the big change with portals happened actually with the economy in 2008 when the economy downturned. And then LMS is, prior to that, was just seen as a necessary cost in the business.
Yeah.
It's, no one particularly got excited by them. Right. But it's like it's a cost of doing business. Being from the LMS world, not particularly exciting. LMSs had to justify themselves and earn. And what we saw was a big movement to extend enterprise, getting the LMS and position it out externally to maybe training up your distribution channels, controlling how your brand is represented within the marketplace. And in that case, the LMS had to sometimes whip its top. It had to pay for itself. So there had to be a merchandising within the LMS. So all the things you see in the Amazon world, copying a lot of ideas from e-commerce world within an LMS. And the other part of it was it had to sell itself. The idea of selling learning to your own employees was a kind of bizarre concept when people just had to do the training. Yeah, you had to do it. Yeah, things changed. In 2008 was the tipping point. And portals is a way of actually the LMS just peeing in the background. And you can position the LMS to be a e-commerce engine. It can be the front window to your brand within your organization. You mentioned JLR. They are it's one of Britain's biggest brands. It's a huge success story for the UK. They're going to want something that represents their corporate identity and their values, and LMSs don't. The portal can do that. So looking at this idea of the extended enterprise, this idea you've got increasingly your brand, your company relies on people not on your payroll. They could be in the supply chain. They could be out in the marketing distribution chain at the other end. Of course, car manufacturers are a classic example of that. They have a core of people. They rely very heavily on the people out there, that distribution chain. And those people very often, not only they're not employed by the organization, they may serve many competitor organizations as well. Now, how do you make sure that you're representing the brand strongly and getting the information out there for those people to be able to deliver great information in a great way about, for example, Jaguar Land Rover cars against a consumer who often is extremely well versed because they've gone on the internet, they know everything about that particular model before they come to the showroom.
Well, I mean, I think in that context, you've got to be careful in how it's targeted, but again, if I come back to the Google analogy, what Google does is it provides you with the information that's relevant to you, but you're never in doubt for a second that you're within that Google environment. And I think that's the aim, I think, of any of these kind of portals or delivery mechanisms, that what you want to do is to aggregate content and mechanisms that are necessary and vital for the user within the framework of a very clearly decorated design brand. And that doesn't have to be anything especially complicated. The complicated bit is what Netdimensions and other systems do behind the scenes in making sure that the content is delivered in a timely and appropriate and tracked fashion. But the actual mechanism that the user gets, I mean, Apple have been so successful because what they do is they deliver simplicity. When you need it. And that's kind of where
and Google the same. And of course, I love it when people say to me, no, I want that website to look a bit more like Google or more like Apple. What they're not saying is, and by the way, here's $1 billion to do the research on the UX that are going to make it really smooth in the back end to make it seamless for you.
The whole user experience is key. And within a portal environment, the LMS is probably only one part of that portal. And people assume, who maybe aren't that familiar with the idea, that the portal is just a fancy skin to the LMS. It's not. When we're looking at portal by its original definition, going back into the early 90s, is an aggregator of information that comes through. So you might be taking maybe just 15% of the functionality of the LMS and having it in the portal. There might be a store in that portal. There might be a video channel in that portal. There might be links to their product information. It's the front window to representing what they do.
It's the place where you go to work. And part of that is learning. It's not the place where you reluctantly go to learn this course you have to do.
Most of the time, if you're doing a portal correctly, the users, be they distributors, employees, a sales channel, whatever it may be, they don't have a clue they've even touched an LMS, and that's key.
And the great thing about it is if you've got something on there that has all those little, I don't know, widgets, applications, whatever, that lead you to the other things you have to do, maybe it's a timesheet, maybe it's a reference work, I need to find where that store is, and some sort of learning access is built into that, actually makes the learning far more accessible and far more part of your daily life.
Completely.
Sorry, Matt, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, and also it breaks down the kind of artificial barrier between a piece of learning and your social learning or your contextualized learning or whatever. I mean, it makes it all part of the same thing. And you know, I mean, I don't want to overblow this. I think it is still a process, and I think, you know, with each iteration of a portal, each iteration of a learning management system, each company you go into and you talk about their processes and what they want to achieve, there's definitely an evolution of this. But I feel like, you know, that there is a very clear vision of where this is all ideally going. And yet it's something that can be kind of tied down for an individual client, because, you know, it may be that a smaller organization doesn't want all of the bells and whistles, but wants that easy to find functionality, that simple deliverability of content, and the rich tracking features as well.
Yeah, also on that vein, it's the context. You know, we're talking about automotive, medical device manufacturers, but if you're looking at maybe succession planning, your top leadership in the company, often what we're seeing now from our clients is maybe building an app that the leadership team can run on their tablets, and that maybe has something specific to that leadership group, so they feel special. And it's, you know, we're talking about people, you know, talk about badging within a company and gamification, but the idea that people aspire to have this app, the fact that you have this app shows you're tagged as a senior in the company or an aspirational leader, and there's some value to that. And
it's a cheaper and easy to distribute version of the gold keys to the washroom. Yeah,
you know, you know that you've got special parking place in the car park because you've got the app. And I've seen that now with quite a large consultancy firm where they're actually building an app to put onto go to people's iPads and Android devices. If you have the app, you know that you've been tagged as a future leader in the organization. There's some kudos to that. It's a bit of currency.
And of course, that's going to mean you want to go out there and you want to do the learning. You're even more likely to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to this whole idea that you've got to merchandise, you've got to sell the learning. It's bizarre idea talking of e-commerce terminology, but that's what it is.
Now, talking about e-commerce, I was very interested in what you were saying earlier, Liam, about this idea that you can have an LMS, and we've seen this happen very effectively with many organizations, where the organization moves from being an internally focused learning and development department to selling perhaps initially to the supply chain and then perhaps selling to people beyond that. You were talking, Matt, about the need or the ability to represent a particular picture of the organization. How complex is it, and are people doing it effectively, to have a hierarchical permission structure whereby it's quite possible to say, right, if you're inside, you don't pay, if you're outside, you do pay, and if you're a particular type of organization outside, you have to pay with a different structure to what you are if you're from a different organization?
I mean, again, I mean, I'm speaking here about the integration with Netdimensions specifically, but I mean, in that context, it's relatively straightforward, because the way that it works for a user is a member of a group, and so that user can be a member of a group who pays or a member of a group who doesn't pay, or if they're not a member of the group, maybe they have to pay to join that group. And how that represents itself to the end user is, in a way, it's exactly the same as an in-app purchase on an app. You know, I get the app, I get the free app, I get the portal, I get whatever. You know, and then when I want to go to buy that next bit, maybe I already own the piece of learning. Maybe I don't. I've got to pay, or, you know, I've got to re-download it. So I think that, again, it is that kind of context that you have to put it into the in-app purchase.
I mean, I've seen some quite interesting examples of this with different clients over the years, and a lot of that e-commerce rules-based functionality that's what we do. That's the technology in the back end, and the users don't really need to see it. It just happens. But if you put in some context around it, again, a manufacturer of personal protection equipment, they just put QR codes on their products. So when the QR codes for the products are sold, people just, now on my phone, I've got a scanner for QR codes. They scan the QR code, and that gives them a one-time access to a piece of training on that ear muffler, helmet, whatever it may be, or asbestos respirator. If they then want to do more additional training, they have to pay.
Wow.
So this is real, it's a cross-selling. And it's so simple to do. People think, oh, well, what am I use a QR code for? Why would I want a QR code in an LMS? Well, that's why.
And what a fantastic example. I do love this approach, because too many people are under pressure with their budgets and in learning and development departments. I do believe it can't apply to everybody, but for many organizations, they've probably got something they could sell if they had the right platform that they were working with. We started at the beginning with what's new and exciting. Okay, obviously going to wrap up with the inevitable question. Where do you see the LMS being? What's the exciting thing that we're going to be looking at in 2 years' time? Or if you want to be further far out, 5 years' time?
I think the exciting thing that we're going to be looking at is sort of what Liam said, which is that there is no visible LMS.
Right.
And I think the really exciting thing is that, you know, your own personal, I mean, again, the Google Now idea, the fact that your own personal learning is somehow going to be delivered to you in that sort of way, very personalized, very specific, and very current.
I think probably one of the bigger changes for us on a technology front is Tin Can or the Experience API,
right.
whichever term you want to use. And I often look at it like the iPad was 6 years ago. When iPads came out, everyone, Stephen Fry said, oh, it's cool, and you can swipe and you can do this. But no one actually really knew what you can use it for, apart from it was cool.
Yeah.
And it's really the use case from people using iPads and tablets have created uses we never saw for iPads. They use from everything from taking orders in restaurants to being the electronic flight bags for pilots and saving American Airlines, I think it's about 10 million a year in fuel costs. So that's the same with Tin Can and Experience API. We all know it's cool. I love the idea that it can be browser, can be removed from that learning path. It could say straight in the app. You can do bookmark it functionality, all great stuff. But what we need to see from clients, from everyone out in the conference, is use cases for this, and then technology companies like us can respond to that. Brilliant.
There we go. So you heard it here first. Learning Technologies 2015 predictions for 2 years in the future. We'll be back at Learning Technologies 2017 with Matt Wicks of Dreamtek and Liam Butler of Netdimensions to see whether, in fact, the LMS does become invisible in the background and whether use cases help us use QR codes and other technologies such as Tin Can API to make a whole new learning experience. Join us again in the future, maybe not in 2 years' time. I look forward to being with you then. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.